You might want to come and take a look.
Welcome to Auntie Sue's Pandemic Kitchen, live from Mount Vernon, Maine. I'm in my grandmother's old kitchen. We've had a lot of technological problems, but there's my grandma's technology. She had a wood stove, and that layer bust sign behind me was where the vent used to be. So, welcome. I'm so glad that everybody could be here, especially with all the Zoom issues that happened. And sadly, our friend Michelle is not with us. So she is the one who did ask for the thing on sprouts, me to do this on sprouts, and so that's what I'm doing, and I'm going to talk about sprouts. So sprouts are really, how many people here actually do sprouts? If you've ever grown your own sprouts and put them in your food, Fran's done it. She's a.
I don't know about growing them, but no.
Yeah, you've eaten them or you've grown them? Fran, did you grow them or eat them?
I ate them.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm talking about, we're going to learn how to grow them tonight. So that's really good. And what I'm going to do is put everybody on mute to start here so that I have a little bit better sound background. And then if you wave your hand and if you have a question, let me know and then I can unmute you. But anyhow, Michelle, who's one of our regular participants who may have had some trouble with the Zoom link tonight, which we had a lot of problems with, she asked about sprouts. And so I have been growing sprouts to show how to do it. And the #1 sprouts that we usually grow is mung beans, but because I was moving to Maine, I couldn't find my mung beans for a few days. So they haven't gotten the head start that some of the others have. And now I'm hearing that my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully it will stay stable. I'm hotspotting, so we'll see. Okay, so sprouts are really cool because you can grow, even if you live in an apartment, you can grow fresh vegetables. In an apartment, even without sun, you can grow fresh vegetables. And one of the things I'm thinking about doing, my next book, Sustainable Healing, Simple Habits to Transform the Planet. One of those things is to grow your own food. So everybody can grow their own food, and to be able to do that and to connect to life in that very intimate way, and knowing where the food has come from and understanding that everything we eat is living. And so you're going to have a very intimate relationship with your little sprouts if you decide to do that. Sprouts are also interesting, I think, in terms of this time that we're in the pandemic time. And that's because if you look at a seed and you don't know what you're looking at, it could look very much like a pebble. So essentially we have with a virus is really nothing but a container with DNA in it, because viruses evolved, or so they think, they're still studying and trying to understand viruses, but I'm reading a wonderful book on the 1918 pandemic that this guy wrote in 2003, and it wasn't a big seller in 2003, but it's on the New York Times bestseller list now. So go figure, it came into its own now. But he talks about viruses. The way they think about viruses is that instead of evolving to be more complex, they became more simple. So essentially it's just a container with DNA in it. And the outside of the container is what connects. It's a very enterprising container that goes around and attaches to other cells and sends its DNA and RNA and replicates that way. Seeds are also very similar, because a seed is pretty much a shell there's a tiny embryo plant in there, but it's so compacted that you really don't see it. You look at a seed and it looks like a pebble, and it behaves like a pebble unless you add water to it, and that changes the whole equation. So when we add water to seeds, they transform. The water is what makes life happen. And so when we talk about healing, I've been listening to Dr. Lou talking about healing, and he always says you have to meet the right requirements. And of course, the right requirements for a seed is, number one, it has to have moisture. And the same thing's true about viruses. You know, that's why they tell us that it's the sneezes and coughs that allows the COVID-19 to travel. It doesn't travel very far unless it's got moisture around it, because if it dries out, just like a seed, if it doesn't get enough water for a long enough period of time, the seed will also die. Same thing's true with the virus. It has to have moisture. And that's why it doesn't live very long on cardboard or cloth, but it lives a lot longer on things that don't absorb the moisture, like plastic and metal. Also, the pH has to be just right. So when we wash our hands with soap. Soap is alkali. It's made from lye or something else that's similar alkalinity. And that then destroys the covering of the virus, and the virus dies. Seeds also, if you have them in the soil that's too acid or soil that's too a base, alkali, that seed will also not grow. So they need to have the right requirements. But when we meet those right requirements, the magic happens. So we take some seeds. So what I took that I have to show you is somewhere over here. Okay, so I have some mung beans here. Mung beans are the typical sprouts that you get if you go to a Chinese restaurant or something. I'm gonna see if I can, I have my laptop precariously over my sink. It's kind of a little scary, really. But I don't know if you can see these little mung beans. See them? Little mung beans. This is what, when you go to a Chinese restaurant and you get, let me see. Okay, and you get sprouts, this is what they were made from. So these are, you know, they have a little bit of a white spot on them. So maybe they don't look exactly like a pebble, but they're pretty close to looking like a pebble. So these I finally found last night or this morning sometime. I think it was this morning actually. And now I've soaked them. And this is the first step. You put them in water and you can see that they've gotten a lot bigger. They've soaked up some of that water. So that's what they've done. So they've gotten a lot bigger. Then before I left New York, because I was supposed to come here a week ago and I didn't come until yesterday, which is why chaos is ensuing around me. I got mustard seeds. So I have mustard seeds here. I'll take a couple of them out so you can see how tiny they are. I love to use mustard seeds when I talk to people about faith, because, you know, they say in the Bible, if you have the faith of a mustard seed. Okay, here's 3 mustard seeds in my hand. Okay, if you only need the faith of 1 mustard seed, there they are. Look at that. So I like hand out mustard seeds. Usually people lose their mustard seed very quickly. That's what happens with faith too. You lose it, but you know what? There's lots more of it. And if you plant just that 1 seed and it grows into a plant, by the end of the summer and you replant those seeds or you let it go to seed, you will have enough greens to feed a family of 4. This is a plant that grows like nobody's business. Okay, so I took the mustard seeds like a few days ago. I soaked them for a day, and let me show you how I had them. I soaked them for a day, and then I put them in. Then I drain the water off, because that's what you do. You soak them for a day and then you drain the water off so you can see the mustard seeds in here. There's a few sprouting. You can see a little bit of white in these. These are slower to sprout. And they came from a spice shop or from an Indian grocery actually. And they may have been treated so they don't sprout. I don't know. Usually you don't have to treat seeds. They have seeds. There are seeds 31,000 years old, plus or minus 300 years. But they have like 31,000 years old. They found these little seeds that some Arctic squirrels had put into the snow, or into their burrow, or wherever Arctic squirrels put those 30,000 years ago. Anyhow, they were able to take those seeds and they were able to sprout them and grow them. And they produced a plant, and they had 100% sprouting rate from those seeds, and usually only have about 90 from modern seeds. So who knows why that happened. But anyhow, then I took some fenugreek. So mustard seeds are going to give you a really spicy sprout, because this is a spice. So it's going to have the flavor of the mustard leaves. I also took some fenugreek, which is another thing that I like to put in tea. I take the seeds and I mix it with sage, and it makes a lovely tea. The fenugreek has a kind of a butterscotch smell, and this is what the seeds look like. I'll show you them. Let's see if I can get my hands. So this is what the fenugreek seeds look like. So I soak them for a day, then I drain the water off, and then every day I will rinse my seeds off and cover them with a little bit of cloth. And the reason why you want to cover them with cloth is because the flies will get to them otherwise. Or where I live in Maine here, other creatures might also be interested in eating my sprouts, and I don't want to share them, particularly not with the flies. So here's what these look like. So these are about 3 days old. Okay, I'll tip some out into my hand. These, you can see, have really begun to make a root. So we add water, and all of a sudden we get the little root coming out. And in a couple of days, I should get some leaves coming out. And that's when I want to eat them, when I've got both the leaves and the seeds. Now, when you've got the leaves and the seeds, the shell of the seed, you can sort of rinse it in water and eventually rinse it off, because it's not as tasty as the sprouts are. It's still hard and tough. So these are my sprouts, and when you use things when you are choosing seeds to sprout, you want to make sure that you choose seeds from plants that you like to eat. That's going to be your best bet. So small beans like the mung beans are good to sprout. Lentils are a great thing to sprout. You can sprout wheat and rye, any of those kind of grains, and you can, and they make nice sprouts. So anything that you would ordinarily eat the greens of. Now the grains are a little bit different. If you have grains grow into grass, you're probably not going to want to eat them. If you let the greens, the leaves turn into green grass, and wheatgrass, you've seen it in the stores, it grows about that high, and then they juice it. The reason why they juice it is because we can't digest cellulose. Turns out, I just learned this today when I was writing my blog post for this. It turns out that cows can't digest cellulose either. So what cows do with grass that they eat, just like any other herbivores, okay, they don't actually digest those things. What they do is they take them into their stomach and let them ferment. And that's why the cow has 4 compartments in the stomach, because it has to ferment that grass, and then the nourishment it gets is from the bacteria that lives on the grass. So they actually eat the protein of the bacteria, and that's what gives them their nourishment. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And so they get their nourishment from the front end of their stomach, and that's why they like sort of burp it up and chew it some more, and that's the chewing of the cud. They're like mashing that up so they can they have a little bacteria farm growing in their stomach. Rabbits and horses, they do their fermentation in the back end of their stomach system. So very interesting. So they're all They're all eating the bacteria. And we, of course, also have bacteria and probably viruses as well that help us digest our food. So all of us, as we've evolved into animals, have sort of taken in the environment, and it lives within us. And this is why when we do things like traditional Chinese medicine or other medicine, we say everything is connected. So we're very much connected to the plant world. So if you, so getting grains make great sprouts, but if you let them turn green, you're gonna have a harder time digesting them. The mung beans and anything that you would eat the greens from, kale is great to grow, radishes you can grow, beets you can grow, microgreens. Any microgreens are usually grown from those seeds, and you would eat the greens anyway. So the seed is a great choice when you use those kinds of seeds. If you were to grow, you can't just choose any plant. Obviously, a poisonous plant is going to turn into a poisonous seed is going to give you a poisonous plant. So that's going to make you sick. And the same thing is true about nightshades like tomatoes and eggplants and some other plants like that, where you would not eat the greens of that plant, you would eat the fruit of that plant. And so do other animals. They eat the fruit, they digest the seeds, and then they don't actually digest them. The seeds, because they have that hard covering around them, and because they also have various chemicals, sometimes that make you feel a little sick, and therefore they go out the back end with a lot of fertilizer and often moisture as well. So that's how they get to spread their seeds around. So you want to pick seeds that you know you like to eat the greens of. Those are going to be your best choices. The beans, like the lentils and the mung beans, those are also pretty good choices, even though we do eat the beans usually. When you sprout them, you get a lot of good benefit from those beans as well. Now here's the other, oh, Chris has got a question. So I'll let you unmute yourself, or you want me to unmute you? Well, okay, wait a second. Let me unmute you. Okay. Yep.
I got it.
Okay, good.
You mentioned microgreens, and I don't know what you mean by that.
Okay, so when you're going to buy greens, are you going to buy seeds to sprout? You're going to go to a seed catalog. Like any seed catalog, they usually have a section now in them and it's seeds for sprouting, or they call it microgreens. And so what they do is they choose from among the seeds. So oftentimes there'll be beets and mustard. So they'll mix a bunch of stuff together. And oftentimes you'll grow those out to be, you'll actually let them get green and grow them out into, so lettuce and those kinds of things you can, because we eat those leaves anyway, you can grow them out and they make really nice little additions to plants, especially, or to your food, especially this time of year in a season, not in Hawaii, of course, but in the Northeast, in our neck of the woods, this is not, no farmers are going to be producing greens outside of a greenhouse at this time of year. Plants, there's not much. I can't even find fiddleheads in the store, and that's one of the first greens that we get in Maine, and one of the first plants that we get. So sprouts are something that you can use to have fresh vegetables. And the reason why we want those vegetables is we want the fiber. Okay, when you come on Friday, bring me some fiddleheads. All right. So did everybody see Kay's fiddlehead? Hold up your fiddlehead again. Okay, it's almost like a sprout, but it's a fern. You have to be careful to get the right ferns too. There it is. So it's essentially a sprout as well. So when you order, so you can make sprouts from microgreens, you can make microgreens from microgreens, and they usually sell them that way in the plant catalogs. And you can also buy, seeds for sprouting. You want to be careful not to buy like a little package of seeds for growing, because they treat those with chemicals, and so those can make you sick. So you don't want to use those to sprout. You want to use things that, like, so I wouldn't buy a packet of mustard seeds, but this comes from the Indian grocery store. So they sell pretty big bags of seeds like this. And that's great. If it's meant to be cooked, you can sprout it. If it's meant to be planted in your garden, you don't want to sprout it because of the problem with the poison. So here's the thing about the nutrition quality of sprouts, is that sprouts are like the purest essence of the plant. In the same way that when we have a baby, that baby is the purest essence of the person that they were meant to be in this life. So a sprout is like a pure essence. So therefore the nutritional value of it, even though it hasn't had the time to grow into a tree or a plant, and if you eat a whole plant, you may get more nutrition, but the sprout has a really pure essence. So you get really good micronutrients and fiber from sprouts, which is the reason why we want to eat vegetables anyway, is we want the micronutrients that they have and we want the fiber, and that you can get from sprouts. But it's also, as I said, you get into an intimate relationship with these little seeds. This is life, and these seeds are giving us their life, just like everything that we eat is living. Comes from life. So life always, for us to live, something else gives its life to us. And these seeds are giving their life. They're little babies. They're so cute. And you can taste them. That's the other thing. You want to taste them every day to see when you get them to just the right flavor. So these are the fenugreek seeds. They tell me when I look it up online that they can be bitter. They're a little bitter, but I kind of like the flavor of them, actually. I've never grown them before, but they were the seeds I could find when we thought we were coming a week ago, and I packed all my seeds and grains in Marsh's car. These are the only ones I could get a hold of. So these are the ones I grew. But they are a little bit bitter, but I think they got a nice flavor. And so that is how to grow sprouts, basically. Well, what have you got there you're showing us, Harold and Kay? Tell us, unmute and tell us what you're showing us. I'll unmute you.
Okay, this is an Impossible Burger with ketchup, Impossible Burger, American provolone cheese, lettuce, tomato, pickle, fresh onion, some goat cheese, salt and pepper, and onions and mayo.
We just forgot the sprouts. I'm sorry.
Okay, I thought you were showing us some sprouts, but the sprouts work. Yeah. So,
I could.
The sprouts are on there.
Should I go get my sprout jar?
you don't have to show us the sprouts. Oh, she's good. So you guys grow sprouts. You didn't raise your hand when I said wave your hand around when you grow sprouts. I know you guys grow sprouts. So that is how we, that's the story of sprouts, and that's how we grow them. So now we'll just open it up for any questions or discussion or anything. Roberta, are you on mute? Yeah.
Yes. Do you grow them like in a damp paper towel?
I don't. I just put them in a jar because it's easier to do that. So I'll rinse them out and then I'll dump them out. And I recommend when you just start with a tablespoon or two that you can grow in a little jar like this. Then when you find out, these are alfalfa sprouts that you guys have, right? Is that alfalfa? Nod your, yeah. Okay.
Looks like it, yeah.
Okay, so hold that jar up again. How many seeds did you put to make that? It's a quart jar, right?
That was about 2 tablespoons, I think, of alfalfa seeds. And
So 2 tablespoons of seeds makes that much of alfalfa seeds.
Yeah.
It's a packed quart.
A packed quart. So once again, it's it's a pretty inexpensive way to get that kind of fresh greens in your food. And you can eat them raw, you can cook them, you can pour warm oil over them and wilt them, which is, if they're a little bitter, cooking will take the bitterness away, generally speaking. I'm kind of waiting to see what happens. So this is just like, I don't know, about a tablespoon or two of these. So you can see they get bigger. I find mung beans get huge, and they're also a great way to bring greens into your diet, and fresh produce into your diet, even in winter. Any other questions or comments or? Any seeds that you can think of that, alfalfa and mung beans are probably the two most common ones. The alfalfas make those little stringy ones that they use in lots and lots of sandwiches. Great in sandwiches and stuff. So, yes.
So Harold, are those some sprouts you're eating right now?
I'm eating fiddleheads right now.
Oh, those are the fiddleheads. Okay.
So they're sprouts too, but they're just bigger sprouts
yeah.
from a seed.
So the sprouts in the jar that you have there, the quart of sprouts, what will you mostly do with those? Will you eat those raw on salads or on sandwiches as garnish, or raw?
Yeah, we eat them on salads.
And
Yeah.
sandwiches.
And
And
sandwiches.
Both of those. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can, if you're wondering what kinds of nutrition you get from the different seeds, the different sprouts. So for instance, the fenugreek, I usually make it into tea, but it was the seed I could find. So I thought, okay, let me see what happens if I sprout it. And I was able to look it up, and it gives you all sorts of nutritional and health benefits. So when you eat the sprouts, it's almost like eating a medicinal herb, because it has that really strong essence of the plant because it's new in the world. It's full of life energy. So it really propels with that kind of life energy as well. So,
Okay, here's the question. So
okay.
mostly we've been talking about vegetable seeds. Are there fruit seeds that you can sprout and eat?
Would you eat I think you need to, the question you want to ask yourself is, would you eat the leaves of that plant?
Oh, okay. Think about the leaves, not the fruit.
Right, because you're not going to grow it long enough to get the fruit. The fruit is actually the covering of the seed, and how it's what the plant uses to make into a seed. So it's essentially sort of the flower and the seed are the reproductive organs of the plant, if you will. So I don't know, I saw something on the internet and I didn't pursue it, but like the avocado seed, you wouldn't sprout it and eat it, but you can maybe eat the seeds. We eat the seeds of the plants, and certainly when we eat the fruit of like a raspberry. So raspberry leaves are very good for you medicinally, but I don't know about sprouting raspberry seeds. It's just easier to eat the seeds. But probably you don't digest the seeds. That, raspberry, that would be one of the ones that definitely has figured out how to mobilize in the world, how to travel. Seeds travel because they go through the guts of animals, basically.
Okay.
So, and some seeds actually have to go through the guts of certain animals. So I think it's the baobab tree in somewhere in the South Pacific, I think, where the dodo birds lived. Before part of the life cycle of that particular plant was going through the guts of the dodo bird. And once those birds went extinct, then the plants also became, they're still around because they live longer, but they're also going extinct because there's no way for them to reproduce, because they can't go through the guts of that animal any longer. So that's sort of the interconnected web that we have to remember that we're a part of. So.
Susan, do you sprout chia seeds?
Yes, you can sprout chia seeds too. They're going to get a real sort of a slippery coating. But chia seeds, yeah, and you can, if you have a little clay sculpture and you put lines in it and you stick the chia seeds in there, then you can grow like hair. That's, you know, the chia pets, that's what they were. It was chia seeds, you know, because they have that, they get kind of a very glutinous coating around them when you soak them. So they will stick to things, and you can actually, they'll actually grow on things like porous unglazed clay. So, but yeah, you can sprout them and eat them. They work well. The quinoa seeds, you can sprout them too. Quinoa is has a coating on it that is soapy flavored. So oftentimes quinoa tastes better. And most seeds actually and grains do better, taste better if they've been soaked for 6 to 8 hours before you cook them. And beans, of course, the large beans, you have to soak for at least 8 hours and sometimes longer. I prefer to soak mine for 24 hours because what that does is it begins that sprouting process. And so it unlocks a lot of the enzymes that the seed keeps together so that it can go through the digestive system of an animal and come out the back end. So kidney beans you can actually kill people with if they eat enough of them and you haven't soaked them. I read one mystery where that was how they murdered somebody. But it's very rare, and you have to have probably, you know, they're not going to kill everybody, but you definitely want to soak your kidney beans for overnight before you cook them. And 24 hours is even better. A lot of people make flour from sprouted wheat and sprouted grains, which actually changes the gluten when you sprout it. So it's much less gluten, which means it's not going to make a good bread because you need gluten, the elasticity of gluten to make bread. But one of the things I like to do with my whole grains is soak them overnight, even the flour. So when you soak the flour overnight, it's the same sort of thing. It unlocks the enzymes and it makes the grain the flour more delicious and more nutritious as well. So that's sort of the secret to cooking with whole grain flours is you need to soak it. Yes, Fran, you've got your hand up. Wait a second, let me unmute you. Oh, you have to unmute yourself. It won't let me unmute you. There.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
So far we're talking about those tiny little seeds that become sprouts. Now, could you say something about Brussels sprouts?
Well, Brussels sprouts is actually, it's not it says sprout. I mean, it's in the name, but it's not a sprout. It is if you let a Brussels sprout plant grow and you don't pick the little sprouts off, they will turn into flowers and eventually into seeds. And if you leave them in your yard for over, you know, a season, the next year you'll have way more Brussels sprouts. All the cabbage family, which includes mustards and cabbage and Brussels sprouts and all those things, are prolific seeds. They make prolific seeds and they grow. They can be very, they'll take over your yard, which is great if you want to eat lots of them. But that's actually, you know, it's just like a little cabbage that grows out and the flower would grow out of that, just like it would grow out of a cabbage if you leave the cabbage to go to bolt and go to seed. We try to eat them before they do that, generally speaking.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Okay, I've got another question. So,
Okay.
you know, in our stores now, we can buy baby spinach, baby kale. Are these actually a different variety or are they just picked very young?
They're picked very young and they're probably grown hydroponically.
Mm.
Or on some kind of a growing medium that enables them to pick them. Tamer just came on. They probably grown hydroponically, generally speaking, but you can grow them. You can do the same kind of thing. That's if you have, they think they sell kits so you can grow your own. Essentially the baby spinach and stuff is just, they picked it young. They probably have bred out spinach that grows fast and can be picked easily. That they probably do that, but you wouldn't have to. You could just, if you like put lots and lots of seed in your garden, you would be able to pick the spinach and leave. It would actually be called thinning the garden. So that's one of the things you can do as well. So that's another great, a great way to do that. But yeah, that's, all those baby things are baby things generally, although they may be like with carrots and stuff, sometimes they grow, some varieties grow big and other varieties are better if you pick them young. But all varieties are a little more tender if you pick them young. That's the big thing about youth. It's usually tender. One of the things that Dr. Liu talks about when he talks about the essence of the plant, the longer it grows, so the babies, have the purest essence. So the sprouts have the purest essence, and the baby things are tender because they're, they haven't gotten tough yet. But when you talk about things like lettuce, so you can usually eat lettuce within 30 days. So it doesn't have a lot of wisdom, if you will. But an apple, because it takes 10 years for the tree to grow, and then it takes another year for the apple to develop from the flower to the fruit, takes almost a year. And if that apple doesn't get cold, if that tree doesn't get cold in the winter, you're not going to get a good apple. So the tree has to go through so many things. And he often says the apple with the scar on it is the strongest essence of the apple. That apple has withstood, has really withstood stuff. So for instance, we had a big hailstorm a couple of years ago, and a lot of the orchards had problems. Some of the fruits, of course, fell off the tree with the hail, but most of them were just damaged. And of course, we just want our fruits to look perfect. And so we don't want to buy those that are not perfect, but actually those are the strongest ones. So that was the year they made cider out of all those apples. So that was the year that thing you wanted to drink was the cider, because the cider had the extra power. Those were the tough apples, the ones that could survive hardship, basically, with that kind of wisdom. So it's an interesting way to look at the spirit of the plant and not just the nutritional material nutrition of the plant. I kind of enjoy thinking about plants that way. And that's why I say, like, you want to sing to your little sprouts, and, they're your babies. You're going to eat them, but they're your babies. Or they're their own babies, whatever. You're still going to eat them. So Tamer, hi Tamer.
Hi.
Missed you. Do you recognize the layer bust in the back there?
I saw that first thing, yes.
I got that as a gift from Tamer for her birthday, I think, many, many years ago.
Many moons ago.
Many moons ago. So anyway. So we just finished up with the sprouting talk, Tamer, but I'm pretty sure you've grown sprouts before. You have a garden and you're one of those peeps.
Yep.
So we have had some questions, and we're kind of running to the end here. If anybody's got any more questions or comments or anything.
Thank you, Susan.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Hey, there's Fran and Carol.
Yeah, Fran and Carol, Tamer.
Tamer?
You look the same, Tamer.
Yeah.
Sprouts are also good on burgers.
Oh yes, they are very good on burgers. Sprouts are good on burgers. all kinds of sprouts.
I want to know what.
I really recommend trying some of the spices if you can get them, because they're going to give you some different flavors, which is kind of nice. You have to see which
I
one.
want to know what was on the meat sticks.
What was that?
I want to know what she's been eating on the meat sticks.
Oh, well, the grilled pineapple. And now I'm using this because my fork has mysteriously disappeared. So I'm using actually my 2 skewers to eat fiddleheads that were on the grill.
Like chopsticks.
Thanks.
Resourceful, Julia.
I raised my hand for you.
Oh, who's raised their hand?
Carol.
Okay, Carol, I didn't see your hand.
Could you run through the different sprouts again quickly? The seeds.
Oh, well, the ones that I used? Yes, I
Monkeys,
can.
mustard seeds, alfalfa sprouts, what else?
So I have the mung beans here. Okay, I have the mung beans here. Okay, and I have mustard seeds here. Let's see, I'm gonna.
I have them, yeah.
Okay, so they've gotten bigger. There's a few sprouts in there. I don't know if you can see. They're just beginning to sprout, so they're a little slower. The fenugreek, I put these both in water at the same time and soaked them, but these are taking a little bit longer than the others. So what I do, I don't know if I can do this without making a mess. Let's see. So what I'm going to do then, because these have been there, they're sort of sticking together. They may need a little more moisture. That might be one of the reasons they're slow to sprout. But you see them in here, sort of rinsing them. Trying not to rinse them over my computer where they will make a mess. Then I take one of these things and I pour them out into that. I happen to be right over my sink, so that's handy. So see, then you can see them in there, and then I pour them back into the jar. And they go back in their little jar. Hi, babies. Then I put the little lid on so the mice and the flies don't eat them while I'm not paying attention to them. And tuck them in. There, go get tucked into bed for the night. I don't know if I had that in front of the camera. There it is. It's got its little jar, little cloth. You could use any kind of a cloth covering or a screen.
Yeah, I used to use a nylon stocking years ago when I remember when we used to have to wear that.
Yes. They would be very good for that.
Pantyhose. Good Lord. Okay, thank you.
So you grew sprouts back in the day with your nylon pantyhose. I love that.
Alfalfa sprouts. But I didn't.
Alfalfa sprouts.
Yeah. But I'm going to try the mung beans and the mustard seeds. Mustard seeds sound tangy. They sound good.
Yeah, I think they'll be good. I think the mustard seeds will be good. And the mung beans are good too. And they're really good for the liver, because when we talk about wood energy, so I try to always do wood, water, earth, metal, and fire. And that's always the sequence that I teach these pandemic kitchens in. So this is our wood energy, and wood energy is really, resonates at the same frequency as the liver and the gallbladder. So they are really important for digestion. And so these plants are going to be helping us with digestion. They help us detox also as well. So oftentimes you'll see people recommend sprouts in any kind of a detox diet because they tend to have that same kind of resonance. They break the fats down, which is what the gallbladder does. They break down, the liver does a lot of breaking down of larger molecules into smaller ones that enable us to have the nutrition. So that wood energy is that full of life and full of change. And the fearlessness, we talked about anger. And so sprouts are good for de-stressing as well. They're part of a de-stress diet. because we want to let go of stress and anger. Having a tantrum, we talked about, I think that the first week we talked about, you're angry and upset. The best way to let go of that emotion is to have a full-on tantrum. Pretend you're two, lie on the floor, kick your heels, jump up and down, scream, cry, carry on. And if you can make yourself cry, excellent. And then at the end you laugh. And that is called an emotional cleanse. And if you do it, it's good. Especially like the lying on the floor and kicking my heels and screaming and jumping up and down. Wonderful way. Then you just feel so silly. You laugh usually. So works out well. I've watched kids go through that. If you watch a child have a tantrum and you just sort of sit back and let them have a tantrum, that usually that's the sequence. And I've seen kids with autism go through a meltdown in the same sequence. It just takes a lot longer. A tantrum is usually over if the child loses their audience, but the meltdown is going to run its full course, and it will usually go through those 3 stages. And you just have to, there's nothing you can do in a meltdown except sit back and wait it out.
Sounds good. Thank you, Suzanne.
You're welcome. Any other questions or anything? I see Gina over there, I think, right? Is that Kay?
Jean?
Anyway, no, I'm just looking at, there's a new person in one of the squares, the Hollywood squares. So anyway, so that's it for tonight. And next week we'll be doing water energy. We'll look at bone broth. So that resonates with the kidney and the bones and the bladder. So
I see they're selling them a lot now. I see them in the stores now. In the
Yes.
box a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can make them at home very easily. So I'll be putting together a bone broth and talking to you about that next week and why it's good. So thank you all for coming today. And if there's no more questions, I'll see you later.
Bye. Ciao.
See you all later. Thank you for coming to the Pandemic Kitchen.
Love it.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Susan, I was going to say, I regularly make bone broth, but it